the Mindset Athlete Podcast, and I'm your host, James Roberts. I'm a two-time Paralympian and owner of James Robert Fitness, which is an online training, nutrition and mindset coaching business. First of all, I'd like to thank Lauren Williams for suggesting this quote to the show. An athlete is a mindset. It's how you prepare, think and execute. Not because of some elite status or physical stature. Anybody can be an athlete. By Chris Harth. And each week on the Mindset Athlete, we like to bring you inspirational athletes, a message, or experts talking about human optimization to teach you how to change your perception of your mindset and become 1% better. And on today's show, I've got Robert Paylor. In one moment, Robert was in the best day of his life, competing for a collegiate rugby national championship. In the next moment, his life changed forever. Robert suffered a spinal cord injury in the first minutes of the game and found himself face down in the turf, unable to move anything below his neck. His doctor told him he would never walk or move his hands for the rest of his life. Through an unbreakable vision and relentless determination, Robert is defying the odds. He's a graduate from the University of California at Berkeley. He's winning the fight to walk again and is sharing his method of how he overcomes quadriplegia. So welcome onto the show, Robert.
Thanks so much, James. I'm fired up for this.
Oh, the pleasure is absolutely all mine. So let's start off the bat, because ultimately you, I'm assuming, have not always been involved in rugby, be it because it's a minority sport in the US. What sports did you do in high school before that?
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't even know what rugby was or that it existed until I got to high school. So I just grew up playing like the big three American sports: football, basketball, baseball, and football was the one that I took to the most. And it was because it was contact. I loved hitting people. I was a big dude. I was always like the tallest in my class, the biggest. That was just what played into my body, and it played into my mindset, was football. So I get to high school. I'm over in the Sacramento area of California. And the high school I went to is Jesuit High School is what it's called. And it's number one or number two every single year for rugby. Like number two is like a bad year for us. And international teams would like come in on tours throughout the United States, and like they'd always stop in Sacramento to play against Jesuit. And I was like still playing basketball. And here I am, like a measly 6'5", right? And we had these guys who were like 6'8", 6'10". I was thinking like, okay, well, I need to kind of find a new sport, because even if I make this team, I'm just going to like ride the pine. So all my buddies were playing rugby. They're like, Rob, you have to go out and try this. It's going to be so much fun. And in football, I always had my hand in the dirt, so I was playing on the line and I was never getting the ball. And they're like, oh yeah, we want you to go play 8-man. And like, you're going to be scoring a lot and you're going to be getting the ball a lot. And, you're going to be going around this field. You're going to be making tackles and bouncing right back up. And then you're on offense. And, I'm looking at the lineouts and the scrubs. It's like, it's just this unique, exciting game. And I just fell in love with it. I got MVP my first year playing in high school, and I just absolutely loved the game. So that became my thing, was rugby, my sophomore year of high school.
How long did you get around of not being able to throw the ball forward?
That wasn't the issue. The issue for me was like managing energy. Because in football, once that whistle blows, you're going 100%. You're giving everything you have. And then, the next whistle blows and you're done. And, you're resting. You go back to the huddle, you receive the play, and then you get out and you do it again. So I remember we had our first like kind of mock scrimmage, like inter squad scrimmage for rugby. And, I'm out here like, and then they blow the whistle and I just start going. I mean, I'm like sprinting from sideline to sideline, like making tackles. I'm like getting up and like, I'm on defense and like I put my hands in the ruck and grab the ball. And they're like, no, you can't do that. I'm thinking, okay, what? I'm learning the game, but the whole time I'm just like huffing and puffing going. And then it was like 1 minute in, I was just done. I was completely wiped. And I was just like, okay, this is not how you play this game. Because I saw these other people around me, they would, they'd sprint when they needed to. And then when the moment wasn't there, they'd recollect their energy a little bit. And I'm thinking like, gosh, these guys are like lazy, but it just turns out I was dumb and I didn't know how to play this sport. But that was the hardest part in the beginning. It wasn't like so much, trying to throw the ball forward like football, but just learning how to spend my energy.
And obviously, if we go right into how you got your quadriplegic injury, how many times do you replay that back in your mind, and what could have been done differently? Obviously, from an officiating perspective, because you and I discussed about it off air. You were saying there was 5 instances of infringement, which, if you were to take it up a notch to professional ranks, it wouldn't happen. It wouldn't happen. It would be 2, maybe 3, definitely not. And you're going to be pinged, and that person's going to be spending 10 minutes on sitting down.
Yeah, I think about that moment every single day. It's the moment that I'll remember better than anything for the rest of my life, really. The day was May 6, 2017, and I wake up. It's the day of the Collegiate Rugby National Championship in America, and I was starting at this point as a sophomore on the number 1 team in the nation. That's UC Berkeley, Cal. Very historied program, started back in the 1800s, which for us in America is as old as it gets, right? It was very historied. It had a legacy, and I couldn't have been more excited. I wanted to maybe play professionally, do all these things. The MLR was kind of starting up around this time. I was so excited. I had so much going for me. It was very early on in this game that it was 1 minute in, the other team committed a penalty, and we kicking it a touch. So we're like 5-6 meters out. We were lethal in the maul. We were much bigger, much stronger than them. Everybody knew it was coming. So I was the front lifter. I lift our guy up. He gets it, come down, make my binds, and then immediately one player comes in with a side entry on my side. So here's infraction number 1. He then binds me around my neck in a headlock, which at that time in 2017 was the year that they stated you can't touch the head or neck without it being a yellow card. You cannot make contact in this region. We're not playing advantage. Referee's blowing his whistle immediately. You're getting carded. They're not calling anything. 2 more players coming from the side. So what are we on, number 4 now? The same guy who's also binding me around my neck hooks my leg up into the air. So we're in penalty number 5. Another guy who is down at my hips, he slides down to my knees. He collapses this maul. And since I was pinned into this position, I just start riding all the way down to the ground, not knowing what's coming. And then the crown of my head planted into the turf. My body went forward. My head stayed in that position. And then my face just slammed against my chest. I snapped my neck. I just couldn't move or feel anything below my neck. It was that feeling, when you go to sleep, you wake up and then your arm's totally asleep and you just can't feel it. It was like that, but my entire body, and it was instantaneous, and I was completely conscious. I knew exactly what had happened, and that was I'm a quadriplegic. And I just thought that for the rest of my life, this would be my reality, because I had seen the stories on TV before where this happens to someone and they just don't ever move again. I'm thinking this is going to be me. I'm not going to go back to school. I'm not going to be able to go see my friends. I'm not going to meet a girl, get married, start a family. I didn't think I was going to be able to feed myself again. I was laying in that turf, but I could barely even breathe. And here's what's even crazier is that I was in this position. I looked like a corpse on the field, screaming as loud as I could, which wasn't that loud because I was very paralyzed. And the referee didn't even stop play. So they're playing all around me. And, there might be some hardos out there who are saying, hey, if he's not in the direct line of play, then play on. But, we had a very seriously injured person out there. And that was another ridiculous thing. They're literally kicking the conversion over my body, as I'm sitting there with medical attention. The only thing that stopped play was how we scored on them. It was just ridiculous. My medical staff was having to protect me from someone falling on me, because if they did, then it would have got a lot worse, or I could even die. And then they started doing these tests, they're moving my legs. And it was the most surreal feeling ever. It felt like somebody else's legs were being moved. There was just no connection I had to the rest of my body. They're saying, Robert, can you squeeze my hand? And I'm I'm going as hard as I can. And there's just nothing. It's like my whole body was just locked in cement, the ultimate form of claustrophobia, right? And then I got rushed into the hospital. We did all this medical imaging, and the doctor's just Robert, you're never going to walk again. You're never going to move your hands. I mean, you'll be lucky if you can pick up a piece of pizza and bring it to your face. That's like you breaking the odds. And I want to say that's if you survive, because we recommend you go into emergency surgery right now, because the swelling that's in your spinal cord, if it continues, will continue to damage your situation. So we need to come in here through the front of your neck, which has got a lot of important real estate. If something goes wrong, you might not wake up. So here I am. I'm on the phone. I call my religious advisor right away. I'm looking for some advice. I'm looking for some prayers. I'm freaking out. And the thing he told me then, I will never forget. He said, Robert, throughout this journey, there's going to be a lot of things that you can't control. But the one thing you always have complete control over is your mindset. So your ambition, your willingness to fight, to take on this challenge, accept the challenge every single day is up to you. As long as you have breath in your lungs and blood in your veins, you can control your mindset. And it stuck with me. It gave me a lot of peace, knowing that in this situation, I'm going to be on my back and there's going to be a lot of things I can't do. But the one thing I know I can do is take on the challenge. I don't have to sit back here helplessly and let these circumstances act upon me. I can make actions every single day that make me better. So that's what I did. I went into that surgery room, I closed my eyes, and then that concluded May 6, 2017.
Were there any times, obviously, even in the rehab period or even before that, that you were very resentful towards the referee?
Absolutely. Absolutely. At first, we weren't really clear exactly what had happened. And just to start off right away, I don't truly blame the referee for what happened there, because these malls, they can be really dark and it happens so fast. Even if he did blow his whistle, that mall still might have collapsed and I might have got hurt. It's hard to call. It's hard to see. But we didn't even know what happened. So it was about 2 days later that we were looking at the game footage, and there were people on the sidelines with their phones out and people taking pictures that gave this real clear image and video that what happened to me was completely illegal and completely preventable. And when I saw, man, the referee didn't call anything, and not only that, but still to this day, the guy that broke my neck has not reached out to me. He's never said, hey man, I'm sorry about what happened to you. He hasn't done anything. And at first I wanted to be angry. I wanted to be pissed off. And I wanted those people to hurt like I've hurt. And I just realized, man, I have to forgive these people, whether they are sorry or not. I just realized that the more hate I gave to them, the more power I gave to them, and the less power I could give to myself. It wasn't until I let go of that animosity that I could really focus on what I have to deal with. Because what happened to me on that day, I can't change. There's no way I can go back and change that. The only thing I can do is change what I'm dealing with right now. And forgiving those people was so important to my recovery, because it gave the power back to me.
And ultimately, I've seen some of the videos of you getting up out of the wheelchair, probably in your strength and conditioning facility at the University of Berkeley.
That's right.
Why do you think that some people, and obviously when I asked you this before we started recording, because I assumed, scrum more so than a maul or a lineup going wrong, I thought, Robert, front row. And then because of the injury, you've lost the tonnage that the proper front row forward would have. That's from there. Do you think because of what you were told in terms of the mindset of ultimately forgiving, which is very difficult to do, and looking for more empowering ways of using gratitude to move forward, which I think people don't always look at, the power of positivity versus human nature to look at the bad in any circumstance. Do you think being told, and we'll go to the extreme of what you've said, of not being able to lift a piece of pizza up to your face, did you use that as a little bit of a chip on your shoulder? Or, I'm going to be an outlier to this situation. I'm going to be somebody different. I'm not going to be the norm when it comes to this disability.
Absolutely. I knew exactly what that doctor was doing that day. And that was, he was trying not to give me false hope. He didn't want me to go around thinking this is all going to be okay, because it wasn't going to be okay. I wasn't ever going to play rugby again. I wasn't ever going to go running around and doing the things that I used to do. That just was the reality of the situation. So giving someone false hope, that's no good. But giving someone false hopelessness, I think, is even worse, right? I mean, think where I would be today if I listened to what that doctor told me and I took it as fact. I mean, I might not even be alive, let alone getting up out of my wheelchair and walking, because in that first stage, I couldn't even swallow anything for a month. I literally couldn't eat or drink. We had an IV in so I could get my fluids, and then we had a tube that went up my nose and down to my stomach, and it took 3 days to get in there because I'd broken my nose a couple times playing rugby. It wasn't a straight shot, and my gosh, I had to fight through that. I got pneumonia on the second day. And here's the dangerous thing is I couldn't even cough. I mean, I could barely even breathe. My cough was like, so we just had every 3 hours, a respiratory therapist would come in there. They'd loosen up all the mucus in my lungs. And then it was just 30 minutes to 3 hours, anywhere in between there, of just slamming down on my chest. We'd just get a big old dude to come in there, put his hands on my diaphragm and just push everything down. It was like death was sitting with me there in the room, just waiting for me to quit. My doctors are telling me that I might not even survive. And if I didn't put everything I had into that situation, there's no way I'd be here today. It's just not possible. I mean, even with giving everything that I had, I lost 60 pounds in a month. I was playing number 5, so I was in the second row. And, here I am, like 6'5", 245 pounds. Like I was kind of the workhorse on the team. People weren't giving me the ball all the time, but I was going ruck to ruck to ruck. I was locking down these scrums. If there was a big guy coming up with the ball, I was expected to put my shoulder down and hit them. And immediately I'm just like looking down and I see my legs like day to day just atrophying, going away. All these years I put in, hitting the weight room, eating like a madman, just trying to build up my body. It was just shot. It was absolutely shot. I needed hope to get through those moments. I needed that. And where I got it was from this rugby community. It was immense, the amount of support that I've received. I had people from all over the world reaching out to my GoFundMe, and they're making financial contributions because, as you can imagine, the expenses here with the private medical system in America is immense. If you break your neck, it is not a good financial decision to make to break your neck. And I received the financial support, but what helped me just as much, if not more, was that emotional support from people all over the world saying, Robert, I don't know you, but I saw your story and you've given me faith. You've helped me access a level of gratitude in my life to where I wake up every single day and I'm working out and I'm going to work more excited and I'm reconnecting with relationships. You've just shown me how precious life is. You've touched my heart. You've changed my life. It just made it to where I had these few bad apples saying, Robert, you can't do this, but I had thousands of other people who believed in me. And that's what pushed me. I'm a firm believer that you have to believe you can do something for it to happen. That's the first step I think everyone needs to take to overcome a challenge, is just simply believe that you can, because who's going to put in the work if they don't think that's going to happen?
I'd agree with you totally with that sentiment. Do you think, obviously you talked about the gratitude that you were given from all corners of the globe. Do you think rugby to the T of, unity of motion that obviously the world's rugby union uses, do you think it's echoes it with your story?
Yeah, the rugby community was just absolutely beautiful. And, these kinds of injuries, they happen every single day. There's every day people are breaking their necks and they're doing it in car crashes, diving accidents, sports, lots of them in sports. And almost nowhere do you see the amount of support that I've received. I'm just a kid over in El Dorado Hills, California, who was playing in a collegiate rugby national championship, and something really bad happened to me. But the thousands of people that reached out to me, that just has a testament to what the community and game of rugby is. Because here in America, nowhere do you find where people go out and compete in something as physical and violent of a sport as rugby, and then afterwards, like, go grab some drinks, or, if they're underage, like having a meal together or something like that. You don't see that. Like in football, we would be just busting each other up the entire game. And then afterwards, like, I don't even want to shake these guys' hands afterwards sometimes, like you're the guy who was punching me in the stomach after I got tackled. You just don't see that. But in rugby, it was something different. Even when something of this severity didn't happen, and when it did happen, there were a couple bad apples in this situation. The guy who broke my neck never reaching out to me. That's not what a rugby player would do. The coach never reached out to me, and that's not what a person in a leadership position in rugby would do. And here's a whole nother can of worms. USA Rugby wouldn't even say that what happened to me was a penalty. We can talk about that right after this, because for 6 months they had this investigation, and then eventually came back saying that Robert was actually at fault because his head was below his shoulders in the maul. Not willing to admit the fact that I was pinned into that position. There were a couple bad apples, but for those few bad apples, there was just a world of support. I'm sitting here in my living room right now, and I got the USA Eagles jersey over here. Danny Barrett, who's this total all-star for the US Sevens team, his Hong Kong Sevens jersey right there. It's got the grass on the shoulder and all. World Cup winning All Blacks signed jersey right there with the whole team. I have jerseys that I could stack up to my ceiling, and it goes all the way from the New Zealand All Blacks to some Modesto rugby club in the middle of nowhere of California. It's just amazing. It's such a beautiful community.
Well, those the two that you just mentioned, World Cup winning team, and ultimately, well, it's always got a target on its back as a team. The team to beat every single year in year out. Ultimately, they might underachieve, and that's why they don't win every World Cup. But of the one you mentioned, the Hong Kong Sevens is in itself is a pretty prestigious Sevens event on the calendar, and ultimately this year didn't happen because of where we're living at. But I think all of them, from the sense that it's given probably rugby a new lease of life, it gives the developing athlete an opportunity, it gives the developing nations a fair crack at winning things. It's not always the big, I'll call them the big eight of the Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and the Southern Hemisphere, Argentina as well, and obviously the European powers of Wales, Scotland, England, and France. It gives the likes of the US. Who's one of the minnows you wouldn't think of who does quite well? Kenya. Yeah. You wouldn't think of them being track athletes on a rugby pitch, but they give as good as they get when it comes to that.
Fiji's a force.
Oh yeah, but those South Sea Island boys are some big brutes. You can see why they get contracts all around the world. The tanks on the wing or the big boys up front. They just built as big houses from a very young. So whatever they're eating on the islands, I think most people will want some of that.
Yeah, I got to get some of that. Maybe I'll be standing up walking in no time if I get a little bit of that stuff. Totally. No, it's good for the sport. It's good for every nation that it touches, bringing that kind of community over. I think it's been so good for America. It's loving, it's supported, and it's kind of this unique thing in America, or these sort of like countries where it's more of a minor sport, is there's a real connection when you tell someone like, hey, I played rugby. And, it can be like some 50, 60-year-old guy who just played a couple years in college, or, someone who really rose the ranks and has been a respectable player. There's a real connection and tight-knit community because we are a different breed, and there aren't a lot of us around there. So that's also kind of a unique thing too, that it builds this really tight-knit community.
So how do you think because you touched upon obviously the MLR coming into, I think, real existence now. Yeah. You were talking about, the meme aspect of it. How do you think with the rugby element, how do you think they're going to do it differently than obviously the MLS or, the big three. How do you think it's going to try and excite the US population and the viewing public to be able to? Well, we're not going to do it like you guys because we don't deem that we need to.
I think the MLS model is sort of what they're going for. We're trying to get as much talent as we can domestically, but then bringing in these players from overseas who are on the ends of their careers and still want to continue to play rugby. And, we can throw a little bit of money at them, maybe, to entice them to come over here and build a respectable league. Really get some good names in here, build some credibility that way. They've had great TV licensing deals, which have given the sport a lot of exposure over here, just getting the name out. And in the end of the day, when a lot of people watch rugby for the first time, they're in, they're excited. They want to learn more. It's a cool sport, and it's very different than what you find here in America. When we watch a soccer game, most people don't really enjoy it that much. They watch the World Cup, but they're thinking, okay, nothing's happening. And now it's just like, it's 0-0. And people don't really enjoy watching that. I think here in America, it's just like not as deep rooted in the culture. Of course, there's a strong soccer community, but not as strong as football or basketball. But rugby, there's always something going on. It's almost like that's what hurts it in a way, because there's not enough time to run commercials and make a bunch of money off of it like you can these other sports like football, basketball, baseball. That's almost what hurts the game. But I think much of it is just getting the exposure out there and getting people to just know what the game is. Because here in California, it's getting pretty popular, but you go to a lot of these southern, Midwestern states. It's funny, we were traveling over to Clemson, which is in South Carolina, big football town. And they got this southern hospitality over there. We're all wearing like our tracksuits, and we got Cal Rugby on our shirts. And I remember I got off the airplane. We're in Atlanta, Georgia, getting ready to bus up South Carolina. And I'm wearing my stuff. And they're like, "Oh, look at your fancy outfit." And they're like, rugby, like what game is that? And like, "Is that the game of the sticks?" And I'm like, "No, it's not the game of the sticks. It's a totally different thing." But it's just not known even what the sport is right now in a lot of these places. So just the exposure alone, I think, will help.
You think it's educating people? Because ultimately rugby came before American football.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a very foreign game when you try and compare it directly to football. They're wondering, okay, why are they not throwing it forwards right now? Why are they kicking? Why is there a penalty being called now? Okay, now they're like throwing these people up in the air. Like, what's going on? These are just things that you don't really see in American football, and it's so different. So it takes some time. Like, you kind of got to hold their hand and like guide them through the process a little bit. So a lot of times when you watch it on TV, they'll like give a little breakdown during a stoppage of play and say, okay, here's what a scrum is. And, they're really having to explain the basics. There's a lot of education that's going to have to happen.
Well, it still even happens in the more established nations. You played in the scrum, and when ultimately you've got a pundit or a commentator that's played in one of those positions in the scrum, they'll badmouth the referee that you've just flipped a coin here and you've given a penalty one way or the other. And ultimately, like you said, all of the naughty shenanigans that goes into, in a sense, it's cheating or getting one over on your opposition to ultimately make them make a mistake. A little subtleties, but ultimately a lot of referees haven't been players themselves. Well, have you ever seen a ball going straight out of scrum? Even though from day one they said it must go in. I think maybe at the very beginning they might have gone in, it's 50-50 parity.
Yeah, and then the hooker told them to stop doing that.
Any time in professional rugby, it's going backwards. It's giving the attacking team an advantage from that. So he's like, well, that's not straight. The line out is probably another one. You're thinking, well, from a television perspective, that doesn't look straight to me. But I guess they probably give it a little bit of allowances because it's like, well, can't be down the middle every single time because ultimately you're going to lose some of that possession. So I guess they give it a little bit of leeway in terms of that. But obviously, if you give an athlete an inch, they'll take a mile.
Yeah, side entries in the mall too. That's another one you see a lot. Sometimes like you're just running at that thing and it's not going to be okay. I need to like back up and make sure I'm coming in here the right way.
Well, it's
Yeah,
probably a
there's
little bit.
nuances too.
It's probably similar. What I would try. How would you, and from another sport perspective, it's a cynical foul. You take one for the team. Ultimately,
Yeah,
yours it's massively gone wrong,
yeah,
but that's why you would see probably side entries. It's like, well, we might as well take 3 points or
yeah.
ship 3
Right,
points than 5 or 7.
right. Yeah, sometimes that does happen, and I think that's maybe even what happened to me in that mall. I wouldn't be surprised if it was something like, bring this mall down by any means necessary. Where, because we were lethal in those malls. That thing was going in. If they didn't make those moves, we would have scored 3 seconds later. It was moving. And I think at first they were just trying not to make contact at all. They were trying to draw a penalty there. And then like one guy bound up. So we were just like, we're rolling through this thing, and now they're all like scrambling into this mall because one guy screwed the entire thing up. But I think that might have been partially what happened to me. You got guys coming from the side, you got someone binding me around the neck, he's lifting up my legs. They're just trying to get that mall to the ground is what they're doing. Because, then, maybe they'll have another shot or, what happens. That could have been what happened to me too.
Do you think that's would it being a minority sport from a collegiate perspective? It hurts it because if that's one of the big 3, every aspect of that play is videotaped and it's got multiple camera angles that ultimately officials can look at.
Yeah, I was lucky because we just so happened to have fans and kind of independent photographers taking videos from the try line, or the end zone footage, because the game footage coming up from the booth was like this side angle and you just couldn't really see what happened. But I got lucky because we had all these different angles. But this was the national championship too. This was aired on national television. It was a pretty big deal. Think if it was just 1 week earlier in the semifinals and they didn't have anyone recording it. They just had our kind of own independent guys up there in the tower doing it just so we could review film the next day. I got lucky in a lot of ways. And if that was, a big football game, man, you're thinking about semifinals and stuff like that, or a big bowl game for college football, they would have angles everywhere. And I think they would have been more on it from a governing body perspective, because maybe now's a good time to jump in of how much USA Rugby dropped the ball there. It wasn't good, because then when we did find out that what happened was illegal, we were looking for it to be investigated. A player got injured in a USA Rugby sanctioned event on national television. This needs to be looked into. This needs to be prevented from happening again. So my coach, Jack Clark, who was a legendary coach in the American rugby community, sent over this evidence to USA Rugby. It took about a month before he was just browbeating them to open up this investigation, that they actually did it, and they put together a committee to review it, send it over to a World Rugby Guys over in Seattle. And 5 months later, they came back and they said, we see nothing penalizable by the perpetrator. In fact, like I said earlier, Robert is at fault because his head was below his shoulders in the mall, and they disregarded the fact that I was pinned into that position by an illegal headlock, bind. They're not going to do anything about it, And then here's the other thing: is on this form it says, like, did you interview the officials, referees? No. Did you interview the perpetrator? No. Did you interview the victim? No. Coaches? No. Bystanders? No. They completely mailed in this investigation. They weren't even looking at all the footage and videos that we gave them. They just tried to brush this thing under the rug. It was absolutely ridiculous. And what was bad about it was not for my sake, because I broke my neck and I will never play rugby ever again. But there are so many people in this world and in this country who play rugby. USA Rugby is the governing body from the bottom level of youth to as high as it goes. You have 8-year-olds who are playing under these rules. And when they make these sorts of decisions, it sets a precedent. And that precedent was, it doesn't matter what rule you break, how much proof there is against you and what the outcome is. If you get away with it in the moment, you're good. We will not do anything about it. You can break someone's neck and we won't do anything. And that was just absolutely terrible. And then fast forwarding 3 more years, it was about 3 months ago that they did make a statement saying that their process was flawed and that they started way too late and that it should have been more thorough, but they still wouldn't say that it was a red card offense. They just wouldn't say it.
But that happens anywhere else.
Does it happen to other players? I'd be shocked if it didn't.
No, but if that was happening to Europe, and
if it happened, yeah,
that's probably okay. I won't say the standard of play is any higher, and if it's televised, even if it was like social media wise, okay, is ultimately the officiating. Well, they are human at the end of the day, but obviously he's let the ball slip massively because 5 infringements is pretty bad. It's pretty shocking. You probably allow somebody the grace of 1, 2.
Right.
Coach probably be infuriated by 3, but not 5 or 6 in one instance. So ultimately that comes down to leadership that you talked about with the coach, but obviously the hierarchy that there's no discipline because, we fast forward probably to the World Cup last year. Officials made mistakes in games in pool play. Poof, you're pulled. You've made too many mistakes in this one game on ultimately the pinnacle of rugby stage.
Right.
There's going to be repercussions. It can't happen. And then obviously the officiating there on after because of some of that officials' decisions changed. Ultimately, I think with the knockouts, they probably went back a little bit in terms of we're refereeing a little bit too probably harshly because he was a little bit too lenient. Let's rein it back because it's knockout play now, and it's a little bit more. We have to give players a little bit of grace. Go back to my mother's side of the family's Welsh. Sam Warburton dropping the dude on his neck.
Yeah,
it wasn't deliberate, but that was a red card. It should have probably been back. Or what we're talking about, 13 years ago. That was a yellow card offence, but that referee took it on himself to. Well, you've not dropped the player safely. Did it have an outcome on the game? Definitely. Could Wales still have won that semi-final? Yes. Would they have won the match with 15 players? I would probably say yes, because New Zealand wanted to play Wales because those are the 2 best teams in that tournament. And be it a probably very patriotic Welsh person as I am, that was probably as close as we were going to come to winning a World Cup that we have done on few occasions. We probably could argue and say, the eras of, the legendary teams from the 70s were world beaters. And Welsh people could probably say, well, if the World Cup was around in the 70s, we'd have a couple. But you can't say that because it didn't come into existence till the late 80s.
Right.
Let me ask you this then, Rob, and ask you from an American perspective. Do you ever think the 15 side of the game will ever come close to, knockout play? Or do you think it's too difficult because of obviously the skill, the key skill positions of 9 and 10 are somewhat lacking? Or do you think I'm giving them a rough deal?
I really don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that America could eventually work their way to being a dominant player on the world rugby stage. If the momentum continues the way it's going, I don't see why not. I think anybody that I talk to, it doesn't matter where they're from, they agree that American athletes are just elite. We've got some really great athletes here. They're just not really being used in rugby. They're playing kind of more of these major sports, but everyone I really talk to, they agree that, if America were to really put their players into the sport, it would be a force to be reckoned with. And there's a lot of international minds that have entered the American rugby scene too, and can really give us a lot more from that kind of tactical and finesse perspective of how the game works. There's some real room for improvement. There's some real promise, and I hope it does happen. I really do. I think that'd be good. I think it'd be good for rugby, just to increase that level of competition over here in this region of the world where we just don't really get noticed at all in the game. I think that'd be pretty cool, and I think it absolutely can happen.
Do you think the US and Canada are somewhat forgotten after it? Because obviously Argentina has punched above their weight for so long. Ultimately, when it came to the table, as which championship they were going to enter, was it going to be the Six Nations or was it going to be the Rugby Championship? Ultimately, they've gone with the Rugby Championship and have elevated their game to another level. We're playing the Australians and the Kiwis, and obviously South Africans is a completely different game altogether. But playing the Australians and the Kiwis so often is so expansive that ultimately they've used a forward pack, and now their backline is lethal. How do you think the US or Canada can kind of cement their place into the Northern Hemisphere? Because ultimately the Southern Hemisphere probably wouldn't work.
Right. Before the World Cup, the USA was gaining some respect. We had a win against Samoa, we had a win against Scotland, and then we beat Canada. We were really rolling, and then we just got to the World Cup and we just completely underperformed. Just didn't play quality enough rugby to advance at all. So I think we're already showing some signs of life, honestly. And I think we were gaining some respect. People are kind of looking over saying, what's going over there on the other side of the Atlantic? There's something going on. So we are getting some momentum going. It's cool to see. I hope it expands. I hope it keeps going.
Do you think that's why the likes of, I know why the Irish did it as well, because it was using their Irish community in the US to be able to come out and support them when they beat the All Blacks in Chicago.
Yeah.
Do you think having more games like that of the countries coming over and ultimately playing amongst their expats is going to help grow the game as well?
I think 100%. Absolutely. And especially bringing it into these big cities. There's some times you talked about Irish support, and there's a lot of Irish pride. I think, you go to Boston and Chicago, a lot of these areas, they're into it. And to have Ireland coming over, they're going to be at that game. But, even so, I think if you put it in a major city, people like looking for stuff to do, and then they like these experiences. And if it's properly marketed, I think it would absolutely be there. With the Sevens World Cup, that was fun. That was cool. I really enjoyed going to that. And it was cool to see all these different people, because especially, in America, they call it the melting pot. There's all these different nationalities. There's all these different people, who are already here. They don't have to take a big plane ride to get over and be able to watch that game. So there's some opportunities for sure. I think that would absolutely help the game and also show what real quality rugby should look like. That helped too.
So what's your take on Christian Wade going from rugby to trying to make it in the NFL then?
I wish him luck. I don't follow individual rugby players that much. It's so hard, to even watch a rugby game here in America. You got to wake up 2 or 3 a.m., do that stuff or just record it. It's a really tough transition. I've seen that in America and people I knew just in high school and college. It was much easier to transition from football to rugby in America than it was from rugby to football. The mentality is different. In football, you really are fighting for every single inch. So if you're getting stood up and stuff, you're not trying to get to the ground and get another phase going. I mean, you're just pushing as far as you can. You're staying up. You're just clawing for every single inch. If you're doing that in rugby, then that's dumb. You're setting yourself up for failure in the next phase. The contact's a lot different. You see in football, a lot of people hit with their head in front of the ball carrier instead of their head behind. Actually, that's something that's changing a lot to reduce concussions and head injuries. But it's definitely a tough transition. It's really hard. And then, the skill sets just different. And to come in and do that at the highest level, you have a higher chance of getting struck by lightning statistically than you do of going to the NFL as a football player in America. It is very difficult. So yeah, I mean, I wish him well. I don't know the guy personally, but I wish him well. But it's a challenge.
Do you think more Americans should look at rugby as a opportunity to represent their country from that perspective?
100%.
Ultimately, it's Olympic sport, and I think the sevens game. Well, you've seen it. It's more fast paced. It's 20 minutes long. Mm-hmm. It's pretty much action packed from minute go until the finish of a hooter horn, not a whistle. It's entertainment. I think where it's probably all started, the razzmatazz is Hong Kong Sevens, and I think. Did you ever see the one that went viral of the Las Vegas Sevens when the parachute had come down too early?
Oh no, I did not see that.
Yeah,
what happened?
I think it was the third, fourth place match overran because it was still tied. He come down with the match ball for the final and landed in the middle of the pitch. So the referee could see this guy coming down, and I think the commentary is like, "Well, we can't do it. You can't make him go back into the airplane.
Right?
Let him land, and then ultimately try and wrap up the parachute as quickly as possible and get off the field so they can finish the game."
No way. Yeah,
I guess nobody thought of that. What if there's no team winning at that particular moment?
Right. Yeah. Might want to have a little fail safe for that one because once you're out of that plane, it's pretty tough to get back in. Yeah. That's crazy.
And ultimately now, Rob, are you still quite close to Cal University, even though you've long since graduated?
Yeah, very much so. My rugby team has been immense in their support for me. I could talk about this all day in that when I first got hurt, they had a schedule, and every single day they'd make sure that someone came down to see me because I was in the hospital about 2 hours from Berkeley. Just being able to see my friends, like have that semblance of normalcy in my life, that meant a lot to me. And then I went over to Denver, Colorado to do my rehab for a year. I was away for a year, and people would fly all the way out, halfway across the country to go see me. And, we'd be hanging out and just having that. It meant so much to me. It was something that I missed so much, was just to be able to be with my teammates, be with my friends. We were really close. And, we all went out there on that field knowing that we could make a sacrifice like what I made. That could have happened to any one of us. It just so happened to me. But it's a mindset. It's a very selfless mindset that you have to walk out on that pitch. You have to be ready to give a lot for your teammates. Now, once I returned to UC Berkeley, it was looking like a big challenge at first because the hills of Berkeley are immense. It's like San Francisco, if anyone's ever been there, see a movie. It's massive. And, here I am. I'm just like grabbing this wheel and I'm pushing it over and over and over again. And I'm about 200 pounds still. So, that's a lot to push with my arms, which I had to will back from quadriplegia. So what we had was a spreadsheet where my teammates would sign up for slots, and it would be from class to class or, workout to class or back to my apartment, where they would just, they grab a hold of that wheelchair and then help me get up those hills. And not just that, but being there and supporting me. Our associate head coach, who's also our head strength and conditioning coach, Coach Billups, he did all of my rehab for 2 years. He gave more time and energy than any of my physical therapists actually have in the hospital or anything. And he didn't know anything about neurological recoveries, right? He was a rugby coach and he knew how to get people strong. So I didn't even have to ask him. He just said, "Okay, Robert, what do I need to research? Who do I need to talk to so that we can keep you moving in your progression?" So when I first got with him, I was in this very big supportive walker, and I could go about 50 yards. And then over the course of a year, I was able to go 1,000 yards in that walking, able to stand up much more efficiently. The year after that, I worked over to a standard walker, just the one where your hands are about at hip level, which was a big challenge for me. I started out being able to go about 25 yards, worked my way up to where I do 200 yards every single day now. And then the sit to stand, where I can now stand up out of my wheelchair and my walker entirely on my own. That's something that took me 1,220 days to accomplish. And actually, I posted on Twitter, and it went kind of viral. I got about 3.2 million views. So that was pretty cool. It's amazing to see this world of support that I've received. It makes it worth it for me, because when I get up and I work out, I give it a lot. It's about 3 hours long. And by the end of my walking sessions, I'm screaming with every single step. I mean, I am putting everything I have out there. There are times when there are literally tears coming down from my eyes. I am struggling that much through the workout. And it's not just to get from point A to point B why I do that. And when I think, why do I need to take another step? Why do I need to take another step? Because it's a real conscious decision. And it takes a lot out of me. It's for others. It's a commitment to others that I have made. And it's the biggest commitment I've ever made in my life. That's something I recommend for everyone. Do not do what you do for yourself, but do it for someone else. It can be your family members, your teammates, your coworkers, someone you don't even know, like in my case. But when we do that, it propels us to do something really special, to be able to accept that help from others and then give it to someone else. That is just a beautiful cycle.
Let me ask you this then, Rob. Any point during that journey, had you ever contemplated trying for the US Paralympic team for, well, it's got multiple names for it, quad rugby, murder ball, or wheelchair rugby? Had you ever thought about doing that?
I totally have. Yeah. So over in Denver, Colorado, where I was doing my rehab, they had a very good team. I think they had about 4 or 5 Paralympians on that team. Gold medalists. We compete in that stage very well. And it's not a lot like rugby, really. I think they just took it for the contact aspect of it. It's probably more like basketball, where there's contact and you score, kind of like football or rugby, I suppose you could say. But you're just in these metal wheelchairs that look like they came out of a Mad Max movie, and you're just laying it into each other. And I miss contact. I totally do. That was something that I just like fed off of. When you play contact sports your whole life and then it's just gone, you're thinking like, man, I just need to hit somebody, right? This sport, at first when I was getting into it over in Denver, I wasn't allowed to make contact just because my spine was still setting and still recovering. It's not something that I've gotten into, because now, just as I graduated from Berkeley, COVID hits. So, we're not going out doing a lot of sports and seeing people, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's something that came in my future. It was really cool one day. The head coach for the U.S. quad rugby Paralympic team actually visited me when I was in Denver, and we were chatting. So I think he might have planted a seed in me. I might be out there. Yeah.
Well, ultimately that's the pinnacle, isn't it? For, rugby, Olympic or Paralympic sport, is to wear your national colours. And I was fortunate to be able to do that twice. Yeah. If you asked me that, what we now need 20 years ago, I'd have jumped at the chances of 1. To do 2 and to be able to do it on home soil. Yeah. You got to do that. Could be, I don't know, on your wish list. I must compete in LA in 2028.
Totally. And competition, like sports competition, there just isn't anything like it. It's just like, it's the simulation of life, and it teaches you all these skills, all these tools. These skills and tools that I learned in athletics, they've helped me to overcome quadriplegia. When I first was thinking about goal setting, and okay, what do my goals want to be? At first, I couldn't really put a timeline, of when I was going to be able to do anything. I didn't know if I was ever going to get out of my wheelchair, but I could build up habits thinking, okay, I'm going to go to the gym every day. I'm going to put in my 8 to 9 hours of rehab in that first year, and now putting in my 3 hours of rehab in that really intense physical stuff. I was in that habit of putting in the work to get something out of it. And I learned that through athletics, just being comfortable or being uncomfortable, being able to seek discomfort. That was something that I learned through athletics. When I'm like, wake up the next day and I put in a leg workout and my legs weren't sore, I'd be like pissed off. I'd be thinking, man, I didn't do enough. I got cheated yesterday. I just wasted that workout. When I got into my recovery from quadriplegia, it was those same principles that have helped me to do what doctors said were completely impossible. So I would love to be back out there and compete. It builds lifelong relationships. So important to me that if I could go back and choose whether to play rugby or not again, knowing that it broke my neck, I would play it again. I absolutely would. Rugby gave me so much more than it took away from me. It made me who I am today, and I'm very proud of who I am today.
Let me ask you this then, Rob, because I agree with you with that sentiment. Why do you think athletes are hardwired differently to think that, even if people are kind of looking at all the negativity that has been in that life?
Yeah.
Why do you think we want to go and replay it again, even though we know that, yes, we would like to change certain aspects within it because we've learned from those mistakes, those choices? Why do you think we want to relive the not former glories, but we want to relive the good and the bad over again?
Mm-hmm. I don't think it's something that anybody's born with. I think it's something that's developed. It's a practice and a habit that athletes use, that we're sitting in that film room and we know that our coach is going to be saying something about it, a tackle we missed or a ball that we dropped. But it's a learning experience. We have to learn from what happened in that moment. And I know that it's fuel for me. So where I get out on the pitch and I start practicing throwing off my left hand, let's say I had a bad moment in that game and I wasn't doing well throwing off the left hand. I know that's something I need to go work on. Or if I'm dropping lineouts, I take that as an experience where, okay, I need to start practicing with my hands. I need to start practicing getting with my lifters, jumping and grabbing these lineouts. It's a skill that's built in our lives, and it translates to everything. And whether you're in business or whether you're, cooking, you're like building up a hobby or something like that. Those kinds of skills are very highly translatable. And also appreciating your victories. That's a huge thing, because that's why a lot of us compete, is to win. We want to win. It's important to realize and appreciate those victories. I mean, no matter how small they are, really, because if I lived my entire life just waiting till I'm not paralyzed anymore and I get out of my wheelchair and I don't need it, I would be a terribly sad person, right? I mean, I would just be completely depressed. But keeping track of these little victories, like the first time I could wiggle a toe, or when I can go 5 meters further walking today than I was able to go yesterday, and treating that as a victory, really allowing that feeling to come inside of me and enjoy it, that keeps me going. And, that's a skill that an athlete has to have, that it's not always about winning the championship. That's not always the moment you can be happy and say it was worth doing this, but all those little moments we have, that's a skill.
Obviously, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, Rob, and both you and I think we could probably talk for hours, and I think people could get that from the conversation. So on that note then, and this is a penultimate question I like to ask all my guests, if you had the opportunity to sit down with any athlete, dead or alive, who would that be and why?
Oh my gosh, I got to think about that question. That's a good one. So if I could talk to any athlete, dead or alive, he is still alive today, and his name is Vinny Pazienza, and he's a boxer. He's from Rhode Island, and you can watch it on Netflix. Actually, the movie they made from his story, it's called Bleed for This, and he's kind of a total Rocky Balboa type. He's kind of that Italian American, like he's got the really close knit family. He's a tough guy. He can take punches, and he works his way to the top. And he breaks his neck in a car crash. He was with, I think it was his brother-in-law, and he was driving too fast. He broke his neck. Now, he wasn't paralyzed. It was just the spine. It wasn't the spinal cord that was injured, but the doctor's saying he's, okay, we can fuse your spine, and then you'll never be able to box again. Or we can put you into a halo, when they screw into your head to make sure that you can't move your neck at all, so that the region can stabilize on its own. And he was saying, if you so much as, tap your head a little bit too hard and something shifts in there, you could be a quadriplegic for the rest of your life. But Vinny's just saying, like, if I can't box, I can't live. Boxing is my life. So he takes this progression where he goes down into his basement where his weight room, and he's literally has the halo on. He's getting down on his bench press. Here's this elite athlete, and he's grabbing the bar, and his arms are just shaking. He's getting pinned down there, with the bar in his chest. but he's like continuing to push forward, and he has a fight. I think it was like in 2 or 3 months or something. It was absolutely insane how fast he had to repair his neck to be able to do this. But he did it, and he got with his trainer, and he got all, bolts back up, ready to fight, and he went out there and he won. It was just absolutely incredible. And, I actually saw that movie just a couple of weeks before I got hurt too. It was very fresh in my mind when I was laying there in that hospital, not really even certain if I was going to survive. It was cool that he actually commented on one of my Twitter posts for one of my rehab updates. And I'm thinking, this guy is an idol to me, and the things he's persevered through. And it was in the end of the movie, something that really stuck with me. An interviewer was asking him, like, I forget exactly how the question went, but his response was that, like, the biggest lie that people tell you is that it's so hard, to push through these things, because it's not that hard. It requires a decision. That's as simple as it comes. That's what it is. It's a decision to keep pushing forward through the adversity, to keep going. People try to say that it's all complex and it takes all these things, but it's a real simple thing. Just that choice to keep moving forward. Those are the kinds of things that have resonated with me. So if I could sit down and talk to Vinny Pazienza, that would definitely be my nomination.
If you had to summarize our episode into one sentence for people to take away, what would that be?
You can always respond in a way that makes you better. I would say that in my journey, the odds were completely stacked against me. And it would seem like there was nothing I could do to get better in my situation. I broke my neck. I had this terrible thing happen to me that people just don't get out of. It just doesn't happen. You put 100 people in a room and maybe one of them is going to get out there. I was very lucky to be that one person, because I made a decision to just respond in a way that was going to make me better. I wasn't going to sit back and let things happen to me. It took a lot of hard work, and it took a lot of luck. It took a lot of luck that my spinal cord continued to develop. There's a lot of people who put in the work and it doesn't happen for them. And it took a lot of support, but I want everyone to know that throughout this conversation, that whatever they're going through, no matter how difficult it is, I believe that they can always make a decision that's going to make it better. That's what I want people to take away.
So once again, Rob, thanks again for coming on the Mindset Athlete podcast.
Absolutely, James. Thanks so much. This was so much fun. So awesome.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And thanks again for sharing your story.
100%.
If you like this episode, please do share it with your friends, and do let Robert and I know what you've thought of the episode by tagging us over on Instagram at robert.paylor. So that's ROBERT.PAYLOR. And as usual, at James O. Roberts 11, and again I'll spell that out for you. That's JAMES, the letter O, ROBERTS, and the number 11. And again, you can do the same on Twitter and Facebook. And in addition, if you had any follow-up questions, don't hesitate to shoot them over as well. And finally, don't forget to check out Rob's website, www.robertpaylor.com. And as always, don't forget to check out my free content at fitamputee.co.uk and click on the tab resources. But not forgetting, I've also started a new Facebook group, especially for the podcast, which you can find by typing in The Mindset Athlete. And last but not least, all the links will be in the description. You can find all the show notes at mindsetgame.libsyn.com under the category General. So once again, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next week for another episode of the Mindset Athlete podcast.